Lazy couch, baby.
Hello, potatoes of all kind, and this is your host, Sunflower Khidd, here to give you the juicy topics today. Currently, hashtag Black Lives Matter is trending on social media, and people are fighting for the justice of George Floyd. Today, I have a guest panelist who goes by the name of
Chris.
just Chris. You're not going to throw in that Bahama Papa?
Oh yeah, Bahama Papa as well.
And we will be discussing racism in the Bahamas. Do Bahamians understand the difference between racism and prejudice? Produce, whatever.
Personally, I don't think they know how to differentiate between the two when it comes to racism. Racism is a form of prejudice, but racism is specific to one's race. Whereas prejudice, it doesn't necessarily have to relate to one's race, but, their race, nationality, which would then be xenophobia.
Yeah, I was doing research on that today, and I was like, we have racism, but we're really xenophobic.
Yeah, xenophobia, and then of course prejudice as it relates to gender, which would be misogyny or misandry. Prejudice as it relates to your socioeconomic standing, which would be classism. Mm-hmm. Prejudice as it relates to your age, ageism. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of times Bahamians just equate racism with prejudice as the same thing, but we don't understand that all racism is prejudice, but not all prejudice is racism.
Ooh, you're right. So, how can Bahamians experience racism if Black people make up the majority in the Bahamas?
That's a good question. And a lot of times people always bring this up in their argument when they say that there is no racism in the Bahamas because the majority of the people are Black, which is true. 85% of the population of the Bahamas is Black. However, we operate with a lot of systems in place that stemmed from racist colonialism that subjugated Black people and kept them at the bottom of the totem pole and the bottom of the socioeconomic standings. Mm-hmm. And we operate with those same systems in place that keep Black people oppressed. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, there is overt racism on the part of a lot of white Bahamians, white foreigners. A good example is you have the Greeks who have been living in the Bahamas since the 1800s or early 1900s. So they've been here for quite some time. But especially on the island of New Providence, they are known for their overt racism, whereas they owned a club. And at the club, they would judge you based on how you looked. And if you looked too Black, for lack of a better word, you were not allowed in the club. And what I mean by that is that if you had on Jordans or any other type of sneakers, if you were a guy and your hair was plait or your hair was in an afro, anything that made you look like a typical Black person or anything that they associated with being Black, they didn't in the club. And these same people, they initially owned, Domino's Pizza. Mm-hmm. They sold Domino's Pizza to the present owners, which is AML Foods. And after they sold Domino's to Bahamians, they turned in and came in and brought in a new franchise to compete with the Bahamians after they sold them Domino's, which was Marco's Pizza.
And I over here loving Marco's Pizza. But go on.
Yeah, so it's little things like that. So racism very easily can exist in the country, despite the fact that the majority of people are Black. If we look at the fact that anything white we deem to be better than Bahamian, any foreigner can make an investment. If we look at Bahama, all of that was crown land, that was Bahamian land. Do you know how much of a struggle it is for a Bahamian to get crown land to do with crown land, which is supposed to do, which is agriculture?
Yes. And
but a white foreigner can come in and get thousands of acres of some of the best crown land in the country, my crown land, because I was born in New Providence, and build a hotel on it when crown land is supposed to be used for agriculture.
I agree. And you wanna know it made me so upset with Bahamians. Like how they say that the Chinese invest so much money in the Bahamian economy. I'm like, all these investments that you're getting from China, why y'all never say, hey China, why don't you invest into vertical farming? Because vertical farming is right. That's where you farm without the use of soil. Because our excuse is always, oh, our soil is poor, so we can't farm effectively. But why don't you be like, okay, China, invest in the vertical farming so we can at least feed ourselves? No, we want stadium.
Right. Exactly. It's stuff like that. It's stuff like that. Precisely.
Can you explain some other ways where we have institutionalized racism in the Bahamas?
Other ways where we have institutionalized racism, if we look at certain spaces, there are certain spaces that are typically white spaces or for white people. Like, for instance, Lyford Key in New Providence.
Mm-hmm.
How many Black people live there? How much of a hassle is it for Black people to get beyond the gates into Lyford Key?
Mm-hmm.
How many Black people live in Princess Isle and Grand Bahama?
Mm-hmm.
So it's stuff like that, And then on Manawa Key, Abaco, you have Black people that have to leave before sundown.
For real?
Manawa Key, Abaco.
I never knew that. And you know what I always felt like? I acknowledge that the Bahamas have racism, but I always feel that our racism isn't comparable to American racism. The reason why Black Bahamians are so oppressed in our own country is it's not just people of high socio-economic standpoints abusing their power, but at the same time, we have to realize that we are the majority. Our leaders are Black. The Prime Minister, all the prime ministers have been Black. We are the majority, and we have a part where we are allowing this to happen, and where we are so passive and we're okay with being passive that we just allow these things to happen and we don't talk about it. And when you go to America, America has been protesting about police brutality, institutionalized racism for years now, and they've been literally protesting in every way possible that they could, in music, in football, in poetry. Like, they have literally did everything that they could have done in order to protest against racism. But what have we done to even start that kind of protest? Like, we haven't even done anything.
Yeah, the last time we had a protest was what, in 2012 or 20? No, when was the last election? The last election was in 2017. So last time we had a protest was in 2017 or 2016 with Senator Renard Henfield, and we march. But since then, probably the last protest we had, or a real actual,
protest
was maybe the general strike of 1958.
1958. But that's the thing, right? And it's like, we like to cry about, oh, our leaders are corrupt and our leaders could do anything. They feel as if they can do whatever they want. They can do whatever we want because we allow them to do whatever they want.
Precisely.
Literally, when Prime Minister see those Bahamians doing the little small protests, this man is be dissing them and he's be laughing at them. He's be like, oh, they're nothing. And it's like, we don't see those kind of things. We get sidetracked at the fact that, okay, they can come across as uneducated, and, like when they're trying to get across their points, sometimes their points might not be as articulate as we would like it to be. And before Bahamians look at, I'd say, okay, I see where the hurt is coming from. I see where the pain is coming from. Let me stand with my brothers and sisters. They laugh with the Prime Minister, and it's like, this is the same reason why we have all of these problems, because y'all don't take nothing seriously. Y'all take everything for a joke. The most y'all ever took something seriously was that Christmas tree that was decorated poorly.
Poorly? Poorly is an understatement.
That was the most unity that the Bahamian people has had in a very long time. And it was like, what? But anyways, next question. Why is white proximity so prevalent in our society, and how has it managed to become a social norm in the Bahamas and has gone so undetected for so long?
White proximity in the Bahamas is so prevalent because of our history. You know, if we look at our history and colonialism, the prevalence was placed on white superiority. And the goal was to be like white people, to be educated like the whites, to have money like the whites, to live in areas where the whites lived because those areas were the better areas. If we look at St. Andrews, QC, both of them started out as white schools, and we deem their educations the best.
True.
The best areas are all those areas where white people live, you know? In Grand Bahama, Fortune Bay, Fortune Key, Princess Isles, in New Providence, Lyford Key, Venetian, all of that. That's just, it all stems from colonialism. All of our issues as it relates to race stem from colonialism and having white people as our masters. And even as far back as slavery, it goes back to then where white people were over us and white people had everything. And for us to have anything, it was just like the white man. So the goal was to have like the whites. So today it's the same thing. Though we're far removed from slavery, the goal is to still have like what the white people have, because the white people have the best.
But you notice that with the Bahamas, when you see white people gathering up in a certain area, and then they start to see black people, well, not let me say black people, but black Bahamians start to be able to afford the same things that they could, right? And they'd be like, okay, so because our area now is so full of black Bahamians, let's migrate to somewhere else so it can be predominantly white. We don't care, like we see these things and we don't care at all. We just let it happen. We don't question it. We don't have any conversations about it. We don't ask, why is this happening? We're just like, okay, we see it. We're just going to ignore it.
I agree with you.
Okay, so last questions. Should Bahamians show their support for Black people in America by holding our own Black Lives Matter march?
Oh, that's a good question. I do think that we need to show our support, yes. Why? Because the majority of our students go to the United States for education. In terms of out migration of Bahamians, the number one destination is the United States, whether it be legal or illegal migration of Bahamians out of the country, it's to the United States. Our number one travel destination as tourists is to the United States. So we are inextricably linked with the United States in so many aspects. And as a country of Black people, it can very easily be a Bahamian that faces the same police brutality that a Black American has faced, because it simply takes one Bahamian on vacation or in school to be on the radar of a police officer and encounter them and be another police brutality statistic, but this time just being a Black foreigner. It could very easily be a Bahamian when we're in the US. And with us getting so much money from them and from tourism, the Americans, though the majority of our tourists are white Americans, countries, New Zealand, Amsterdam, France, so many other countries have shown their support. And we are the closest country to the United States that's not actually geographically connected to the United States. I do think that there should be some sort of support and solidarity shown between the people of the United States and the people of the Bahamas. It's only right, in my opinion.
So listen to my opinion, right? I totally agree with you on that point. However, I feel like there are more than one way that you can show support for another country without doing a match. I was thinking, as a Bahamian, I'd be totally fine if I had the finances, if it was possible. As a Bahamian, if I could travel to American soil and march with Americans, I totally would. But at the same time, I'd be disappointed in Bahamians if the first real protesting march and the first time in a long time that we were able to come together and unify as one voice for a cause would be for a matter that's happening in another country. And it would make me so upset to know that Bahamians can fight. Because I mean, like, we're all Black, of course, but it just doesn't sit right with me to know that Bahamians, out of all the social ills that we have, out of all the problems that we have, out of all the conversations that we need to have, that we were able to come together for a cause that's happening in another country, but we can't do it for ourselves. How do you feel about that?
I feel as if we come together for many causes. So I can't necessarily agree with that. And maybe we demonstrate the coming together in different ways. But even as simple as we look at our most recent election, which was in 2017, you know, the cause then was the disgust and disapproval with the governance of the Bahamas at that time. And Bahamians came out in large number to come together for a cause, which was to show their disapproval of the government in almost everything that the government was doing. And that resulted in record-breaking results for an election, whereas one party was almost able to gain 100% of every constituency offered. So I can't say that we don't come together for causes. Maybe we don't come together in radical ways, because in just from off the top of my head, I can only think of one protest, one riot, like a full-fledged riot that we've had in the Bahamas, which is of course the Burma Road riots in 1942. Then there was a general strike in 1958, and you know there was Black Tuesday. So I can't think of a lot of radical things, and one may argue that that's perhaps not our nature, and maybe that should change, you know. But I can't say that we don't come together for things, because we do. It may not be radically, but we do come together to champion the cause of what we feel is an injustice. Even as much as we look at last week on Twitter, the story of this family that's on a boat in the Ragged Islands was aired by the British Broadcasting Corporation. That angered so many Bahamians on Twitter that they shared it around WhatsApp and Facebook, and it wound up having to get an official response from the Royal Bahamas Defense Force because of the outrage that so many Bahamians expressed by it on social media. It was the same situation with Dwayne Sands and the 6 permanent residents that were allowed to disembark after donating the test kits. So we do come together, and it's shown to have a result. But, you know, just perhaps not as radical.